What would you do if a silent woman asked for help without saying a word? At a snow-covered bus depot in Washington, no one noticed the fear behind her stillness. But a veteran's German shepherd stopped beside her bag and refused to move on. The man traveling with her had perfect papers, a calm voice, and answers that sounded too smooth. One small touch on the dog's ear changed everything that morning. Because sometimes the truth does not shout, it waits for someone patient enough to listen. Tell us where you're watching from, and please like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. The morning came down white over Silver Ridge. Snow had fallen sometime before dawn, not heavily enough to close the roads, but enough to soften every hard edge around the intermodal depot. It rested on the roofs of parked coaches, gathered along the yellow curb lines, and clung to the black branches of the pines beyond the east fence. The glass walls of the terminal caught the pale winter sun and threw it back in long, cold sheets of light. Inside, the depot was already awake. Coffee machines hissed behind the concession counter. Wheels clicked over tile. A woman in a red scarf argued gently with a ticket kiosk that would not read her card. Somewhere near Bay 4, a driver called final boarding for Spokane to Coeur d'Alene, his voice flat from repetition. Corwin James Telfair moved through it all without hurry. At 57, he had learned that rushing made people look at you, and in a place like Silver Ridge, looking like you belonged was part of keeping people calm. He stood a little over 6 feet, broad through the shoulders, solid in the chest, but not with the inflated posture of a man trying to prove he was still young. His strength had settled deeper than that. It was in the way he paused before corners, in the way his eyes measured doors, mirrors, unattended bags, and hands. He wore his usual winter duty layers, an olive-drab combat shirt fitted close at the torso, camouflage sleeves marked by dark horizontal bands around the upper arms, a charcoal softshell jacket left open, despite the cold, dark tactical pants, and black winter boots with quiet soles. On his left wrist, an old military watch ticked softly beneath a frayed green strap. Beside him walked Atlas. The German shepherd's paws made almost no sound against the floor. Atlas was 7 years old, large but clean-lined, with a yellow and black coat that seemed to hold the colors of firewood and shadow. The black saddle across his back fell slightly heavier to the right. A narrow ring of dark fur circled his left front leg like a band. His right ear stood sharp and certain, while the left tilted outward just enough to give him a watchful, listening expression. Atlas did not scan the depot like an excited animal. He worked. Corwin kept the leash short, loose, respectful. No tugging, no parade. The dog knew the difference between a crowd and a problem. Their job was simple on paper and complicated in real life. Corwin was not a police officer. He did not arrest people. He did not search luggage because his instincts bothered him. He worked under a federal transportation safety contract, assigned to observe freight handoffs, monitor restricted areas, and assist local law enforcement when Atlas gave a certified alert. That distinction mattered to him. It mattered more than most people guessed. Years earlier, in another cold place under another sky, Corwin had reported a signal that did not fit, too faint, too partial, too easy to dismiss. He had been told to wait for confirmation. Later, confirmation came in the form of damage already done. Since then, Corwin had lived inside two fears that never stopped circling each other. Move too soon, and you might ruin an innocent person's life. Move too late, and someone might disappear into the gap you left behind. So he walked slowly, watched carefully, let the world reveal itself before he touched it. They passed the baggage alcove, the vending machines, and the locked door to the staff corridor. Atlas ignored the smell of hot pretzels, road salt, damp wool, spilled coffee, engine fumes, and a dozen travelers who leaned over to admire him. Corwin gave a small nod to a driver he knew, then turned toward the west waiting area. That section was quieter. 3 long benches faced the windows. Beyond the glass, a coach idled in Bay 2, its side mirror bright with frost. The sun had lifted just high enough to make the snow outside almost painful to look at. Atlas stopped, not slowed, stopped. Corwin felt it through the leash before he saw it in the dog's body. The weight changed, the shoulders locked, the head lowered by an inch. Corwin stopped with him. "What is it?" he murmured. Atlas did not look at the man first. That was the first thing Corwin noticed. A man sat on the second bench, polished and composed in a gray overcoat, one ankle resting lightly over the other knee. He looked mid-40s, with pale blonde hair combed neatly back and a narrow face built for polite smiles. A dark leather document case stood upright beside his shoe. A blue lanyard with an identification badge hung over his coat. Beside him sat a woman. She was maybe late 30s, wrapped in a slate blue puffer jacket that looked clean but wrong for the weather, too light at the wrists, too thin at the collar. Her brown copper hair was tied low and poorly, as if done by someone without a mirror or without the will to care. A cream turtleneck showed beneath the jacket. Her hiking boots were damp at the toes. The left lace had come undone. A dark blue insulated medical transport bag rested under the bench, touching the side of her boot. Atlas stared at the bag. He took one breath, then another. His chest tightened, his tail went still. Then he barked once, short, hard, exact. The woman flinched, but not the way people flinched from noise. Her shoulders did not jump away from the dog. Instead, her fingers tightened around the strap of the bag, and her eyes dropped as if she had been caught knowing something. The man looked up with practiced surprise. "Problem?" he asked. His voice was smooth, educated, the kind of voice that apologized before it denied anything. Corwin did not answer immediately. He looked at Atlas. The dog remained fixed, nose angled toward the transport bag, ears forward, body still. "Morning," Corwin said at last. "Corwin Telfair, Transportation Safety, this is Atlas." The man smiled just enough. "Roland Kessick, Private Medical Escort." He touched the badge on his lanyard, not quite holding it out. Corwin noticed that, too. "And this is?" Corwin asked, looking toward the woman without leaning over her. "Sarah Belmont," Roland said quickly. "My client. We're transferring to a treatment facility outside Missoula. She has some difficulty with strangers, so I'd appreciate it if we could keep this brief." Sarah did not react to her name. She sat with her knees close together, gloved hands folded over the strap of the bag. Her face was turned slightly toward the window, but her eyes were not watching the buses. They were fixed on the reflection in the glass, on Roland, on Corwin, on Atlas, all at once. Corwin kept his voice mild. "Does that transport bag contain any cooling agents, solvents, medical samples, or equipment that needs to be declared before boarding?" Roland's smile deepened by a fraction, as if Corwin had asked exactly the kind of question he had prepared for. "Personal items. Standard medication, nothing restricted. Medication usually stays with the passenger, not under the bench in a sealed transport bag. She prefers it there." Corwin glanced at Sarah. "Is that right?" Roland shifted before she could move. "As I said, she has trouble responding under stress. Her paperwork explains it." He opened the document case with calm fingers and drew out a folder. The pages inside were crisp, tabbed, organized. Medical transfer form, consent to transport, emergency contact sheet, facility information. Everything looked clean enough to make a tired driver wave them through. Corwin did not take the folder. "Sergeant Booth can review those if needed," he said. "I'm asking about the bag because my dog gave a trained response." Roland's eyes flicked to Atlas, only once, fast. Then Atlas barked again. The second alert carried through the west waiting area. A man near the window lifted his head from his phone. The woman at the ticket kiosk turned around. One of the station cleaners paused with a dust mop halfway across the floor. Corwin raised one hand, low, reassuring. "Everything's all right, folks." Atlas did not relax. Corwin's thumb touched the edge of his watch strap. He saw more now, the small things. Sarah's sleeve had ridden up when she tightened her hands. A pale pressure mark circled one wrist. Not fresh damage, not something dramatic, just the faint trace of a device worn too long and removed too recently. Her left bootlace was undone, but she had not looked down to fix it. Her lips were dry. The travel tag on the medical bag had no airline code, no clinic label, no printed destination, only a blank plastic sleeve. And on her right hand, half hidden beneath the glove cuff, was a ring. Not jewelry, a service ring, worn smooth along the edges. Corwin let his gaze rest there for only a second. "Army?" he asked quietly. Sarah's finger moved. It was almost nothing, a brush of thumb over metal, a reflex from another life. Roland laughed softly. "A lot of people wear old rings. She doesn't like talking about the past." Corwin looked at him then. The man was still smiling, not openly hostile, not nervous in any ordinary way. His coat sat perfectly on his shoulders. His shoes were too polished for a snowy bus depot. His badge faced outward, but the plastic sleeve was clouded just enough to make the small print unreadable unless someone came close. Men like Roland built walls out of reasonable explanations. Corwin had seen that before. He had also seen what happened when someone knocked those walls down too fast, and the person trapped inside paid for it. So he did not confront him. Instead, Corwin lowered himself onto one knee, a few feet from Sarah, far enough that she did not have to retreat, close enough that she could hear him under the depot noise. "Sarah," he said. "You don't have to answer out loud." Roland leaned forward. "That's not necessary." Corwin did not look away from Sarah. "I'm not asking for a statement. I'm giving her a choice." Roland's smile thinned. "She's under my care. Then you won't mind if she makes a simple choice." The air changed. Not loudly. No one shouted. No one moved quickly. But the space around the bench seemed to tighten. A bus outside released a long sigh of air brakes. The sound rolled against the windows and faded. Corwin shifted the leash to his left hand. Atlas remained beside him, still focused on the bag. "Sarah," Corwin said, softer now, "if you want to continue your trip exactly as planned, keep your hands where they are. If you want to speak privately with a female officer or security staff, you can touch Atlas when I bring him close. You don't have to say anything." Roland's voice sharpened for the first time. "She is in a fragile condition. You're upsetting her." Corwin finally looked at him.
"Then let's not raise our voices."
Roland's jaw tightened, but he sat back. Corwin gave Atlas a quiet hand signal. The shepherd stepped forward and stopped more than a yard from Sarah's knees. Then, at Corwin's second signal, Atlas lowered himself to the floor. Not looming, not pressing, waiting. For several seconds, nothing happened. The depot continued around them. A boarding call crackled overhead. Someone rolled a suitcase past the end of the bench, slowing just enough to stare before moving on. Snow slid from the roof of the waiting coach outside and broke apart on the pavement. Sarah stared at the dog. Her breathing had gone shallow. Her right hand was locked around the strap of the medical bag, knuckles pale beneath the glove. Corwin could see the war inside that small stillness. Every instinct told her not to move. Every rule of survival she had been forced to learn was holding her in place. Atlas did not blink. He simply waited. Then Sarah's hand loosened. The strap slipped from her fingers and fell against the side of the bag. Roland moved first, a small forward lean barely visible. Corwin lifted one hand without turning. "Stop." Sarah reached down with a trembling hand. Her fingertips touched the tip of Atlas's left ear. A tiny touch. There and gone, but enough. Corwin stood. He did not celebrate, did not reassure too soon, did not let his face reveal the cold wave moving through his chest. He pressed the radio button clipped near his collar. "Telfair to Silver Ridge Security and Sergeant Booth," he said. His voice stayed level. "K9 has given 2 trained alerts on an insulated transport bag in West Waiting. Adult passenger has requested private assistance without verbal statement. Need law enforcement response and female officer present. No active disturbance." Roland stared at him. For the first time, the warmth left his face. "You're making a mistake," he said. Corwin kept Atlas between himself and the bag. "Maybe." Roland stood slowly, folder in hand. "We have a scheduled medical transfer. Delaying us could affect her care. Then proper review will help you continue safely. She can't be questioned like this. She won't be questioned unless she chooses to be." Roland's eyes moved from Corwin to Sarah, then to the doors leading toward Bay 2. His body remained composed, but his right hand closed around the plastic badge on his lanyard. Corwin saw the pressure in his fingers, the whiteness around the knuckles. That was when Sergeant Kendra Booth arrived. She came from the central corridor with 2 depot security officers behind her, moving fast but not dramatically. Kendra was in her early 40s, compact and steady in a navy winter uniform, her short dark hair tucked behind one ear, her expression alert without being alarmed. She knew the value of not turning uncertainty into panic. "What do we have?" she asked. Corwin gave her the smallest version. 2 K9 alerts, insulated bag, escort paperwork. Passenger indicated she wants private assistance. Kendra looked from Atlas to Sarah to Roland. Roland immediately lifted the folder. "Sergeant, I'm glad you're here. This contractor has upset my patient and interfered with a lawful transfer." Kendra accepted the folder but did not open it yet. "Sir, I'll review your documents in a moment," she said. "For now, I'm going to ask both of you to step with us into separate waiting rooms while we complete a standard safety check." Roland's smile returned. It was almost perfect. "Separate rooms?" he asked. "That seems unnecessary. It's procedure when a passenger requests private assistance." She didn't say anything. Kendra's gaze moved to Sarah, still sitting with one hand near Atlas's ear and the other resting open on her knee. "No," Kendra said. She didn't have to. The 2 security officers positioned themselves nearby, careful not to crowd the bench. Corwin gave Atlas a quiet command to stand. The shepherd rose and stepped back, but his eyes never left the blue transport bag beneath the seat. Outside, sunlight struck the snow so brightly that the windows glowed white behind them. Roland adjusted his coat with one hand. With the other, he held his badge so tightly the plastic sleeve bent at the corner. Corwin saw it. So did Atlas. And in the clean winter morning, surrounded by travelers who still thought they were waiting for ordinary buses to ordinary places, Corwin felt the old fear rise inside him again. Too soon. Too late. This time, he chose neither. He chose to listen. The depot did not grow quiet all at once. It changed in layers. First came the small pause around the west waiting area, the way strangers looked up from their phones and pretended not to be watching. Then the 2 security officers moved the nearest passengers toward the coffee counter with practiced calm. After that, Sergeant Kendra Booth's voice came low and clear, directing people without alarming them, turning a strange moment into something that sounded procedural. Corwin stayed where he was. That was harder than it looked. Years of old training told him to close distance, control the room, make decisions before anyone else could make the wrong one. But this was not his room to control. He was a contractor in a public transportation hub, a man with a certified dog and a suspicion that now had to become someone else's legal problem before it could become action. Atlas stood beside his left leg, still as a carved animal, his amber eyes tracking the dark blue insulated bag beneath the bench. Sarah Belmont rose only after Kendra spoke to her twice. "Mom, we're going to move you into a private waiting room," Kendra said. "You're not in trouble. You're not being questioned against your will. I just want to separate everyone and make sure you're safe." Roland Kessick smiled as if he had expected exactly this. "She doesn't do well in closed spaces," he said. "I can remain with her and keep her calm." Kendra looked at him, then at the folder in his hand. "Not right now. It's part of her care plan. Then I'll review that plan separately." Roland's smile did not break, but the skin beside his eyes tightened. 2 rooms sat behind the security desk, divided by a narrow corridor and fronted with glass. They were usually used for lost luggage disputes, driver briefings, or passengers who needed privacy after missed connections. Today, one became Sarah's room. The other became Roland's. The bag stayed where it was. Corwin watched Kendra make that choice and respected it. Nobody touched the item. Nobody dragged it across the floor. One of the security officers placed a rolling barrier several feet around the bench and guided foot traffic away from it. Only after Sarah was inside the left room did Atlas finally turn his head, not toward the bag, toward her. Corwin felt the motion through the leash. "I know," he murmured. Atlas did not look back at him. In the right room, Roland placed his document case on the table with careful patience. He sat down, crossed one leg, and opened the folder before anyone asked. The performance was clean, almost generous. A man with nothing to hide would help. A man who had rehearsed being innocent would help even faster. Kendra stepped in with a second officer and left the door open behind her. "Mr. Kessick," she said, "you understand you are not under arrest. I would hope not. This is a temporary safety delay based on a trained K-9 response and a private assistance request from the passenger traveling with you." Roland gave a soft laugh. A request? She touched a dog because a stranger pressured her. Kendra did not react to the insult. "We'll document the circumstances." He slid the first set of papers across the table. Private medical escort agreement. Consent to transport, facility intake notice, prescribed travel accommodations, emergency contact information. The documents were impressive at a glance. Heavy paper, clear headings, official-looking seals. A treatment facility name printed in blue. Signatures in the right places. Initials at the bottom of each page. Kendra did not admire them. She photographed each page with a department device, then handed them to the officer at her shoulder. "Run the facility code and contact number," she said. Roland's eyes followed the papers for half a second too long. Across the corridor, Sarah sat in the other room with her back to the glass. The female security officer assigned to her was young, steady, and careful with her hands. She placed a cup of water on the table but did not push it closer. "Do you feel safe with Mr. Kessick?" the officer asked. Sarah looked down at the tabletop. No answer. "Do you want him to leave with you?" Again, nothing. Her breathing changed, though. Corwin could see it through the glass. Shallow in, trapped out. Her shoulders lifted slightly with each breath, as if the air inside the room had become thinner. Atlas gave a soft sound in his throat. Not an alert. Not a warning. A question. Corwin glanced at Kendra through the open door of Roland's room. She had seen it too. "With your permission," Corwin said, "I can bring Atlas into the room and keep him at distance. No contact unless she chooses it." Kendra studied Sarah for a moment. Then she nodded once. Short leash. Door open. Corwin guided Atlas into the left room. He did not speak at first. He did not step close. He let the dog lie down near the door, body turned sideways rather than facing Sarah directly. It was a small thing, but small things mattered to frightened people. A dog standing squarely in front of someone could feel like a command. A dog lying near a door could feel like an exit had not disappeared. Sarah's eyes shifted toward Atlas. Corwin stood by the wall and waited. Outside the glass, Kendra continued with Roland. "Your client is being transported to Northline Behavioral Recovery in Missoula," she asked. "That's correct. For intake today?" "Yes." "Who arranged the transfer?" "Her family and the contracting agency." "Which family member?" Roland's pause was nearly invisible. Her sister. In the left room, Sarah's hand twitched on the chair arm. Corwin saw it. Atlas lifted his head slightly, but did not move. Minutes passed in a slow, uncomfortable line. Then Sarah slid her chair. The legs made a faint scraping sound against the floor. She stopped, breathed, moved another inch. Atlas remained low and calm. Finally, Sarah lowered one hand onto his shoulder. Not the light tap from before. This time her palm stayed there, trembling against the thick yellow-black fur. Atlas laid his head down again. Sarah closed her eyes. The breath that left her did not sound like relief. It sounded like someone had been holding up a wall with both hands and had finally found something solid enough to lean against. Corwin looked away for a second, giving her privacy she had not been granted in too long. A knock came at the corridor door before anyone entered. Miles Danton stepped in with a tablet tucked against his chest and a set of keys jingling at his belt. He was 63, broad through the middle, with a silver mustache and pale eyes narrowed from years of watching security monitors. A navy knit cap sat low on his thinning hair, and his black security vest was stretched over a blue and black flannel shirt. Miles had worked Silver Ridge long enough to know the difference between a passenger who was lost and one who was avoiding being remembered. He looked at Corwin first, then at Kendra. "You asked for recent appearances of the escort," he said. "I can't search law enforcement databases, but I can pull depot footage and booking area access. He's been here before." Roland heard that through the open door. His smile stayed in place. Kendra stepped out into the corridor, lowering her voice. "How many times?" At least 3 in the past 2 months, Miles said. Same general window, early morning, west waiting area. Different coats, but same posture, same kind of bag. With Sarah? Miles shook his head. No, different adults. One older man, one woman with a cane, another person I only caught from behind. He didn't board the bus on any of those clips. Corwin felt the old watch tick under his sleeve. What did he do? Kendra asked. Miles swiped the tablet, waited until final boarding, walked toward the bay, then turned out through the side exit near the charter lane. 15 minutes later, a dark SUV pulls up beyond the camera angle. He comes back without the passenger. Kendra's face did not change, but something in the hallway cooled. That doesn't prove a crime, Miles added, as if speaking against his own hope. No, Kendra said, but it changes the shape of his story. In Roland's room, the second officer returned with the documents. Facility address checks out as a building, the officer said. But Northline Behavioral Recovery has been closed for 11 months. State license inactive. Phone number routes to automated voicemail. No current provider registration under that name. Roland leaned back, the folder still open in front of him. That happens all the time in private care, he said. Companies update names faster than state databases. The paperwork uses the old address because the receiving clinic hasn't finished the transition. Kendra turned to him. What's the new name? Roland gave it without hesitation. Too fast. The officer typed it in. Nothing came back. Across the corridor, Sarah heard enough. Her hand clenched in Atlas's fur. The shepherd did not move, but his eyes lifted toward Corwin. Corwin crouched near the wall, not in front of Sarah. I'm going to write 2 things on a page, he said gently. You don't have to explain. You don't have to sign anything. You can stop whenever you want. He took a small notepad from his jacket pocket and printed in block letter, safe. Not safe. He placed the page on the floor, halfway between himself and Sarah, then set a pen beside it and backed away. No one breathed loudly. The station noise seemed far off now, filtered through glass and winter light. A bus engine rumbled outside. Somewhere overhead an announcement began, broke into static, and cleared itself. Sarah looked at the page for a long time. Then she reached down. Her fingers fumbled once before they closed around the pen. She did not circle the words. She pressed the pen hard into the second option until the paper tore slightly under the ink. Not safe. Corwin did not speak. He did not want gratitude from her fear. He turned the page over and wrote one more line. What do you need us to know? Sarah stared at it. Her mouth opened a fraction. No sound came. A flush rose along her throat as if the effort itself hurt. Then she wrote 4 words. They are watching. The pen slipped from her hand. Atlas lifted his head and gently nudged the edge of her sleeve, not enough to demand anything, only enough to say he was still there. Corwin picked up the page and handed it to Kendra without adding interpretation. Kendra read it, then immediately issued quiet instructions. The public area would be checked, side exits covered. The charter lane watched, no dramatic sweep, no shouting, no indication to Roland that the words had changed the entire situation. 2 security officers moved through the terminal as if adjusting crowd flow. Another checked the outer curb. Miles pulled up live feeds from the west entrance, charter lane, ticket counters, and parking lot. They did not find an obvious accomplice. That did not make Sarah wrong. It only meant fear had a longer reach than cameras. Kendra returned to Roland's room. This time she did not sit. Mr. Kessick, your facility information cannot be verified. He folded his hands, then call the agency. We did. The number provided is not active. I have an after-hours coordinator. It's 8:17 in the morning. He smiled faintly. Medical transport doesn't follow office hours. Kendra's expression remained professional. The passenger has indicated she does not feel safe. Roland's eyes sharpened. She is confused. She indicated it in writing. That's unreliable. She's under psychiatric care. We have not verified that either. For the first time, Roland's voice lost its polish. You're building an entire situation from a dog and a frightened woman who doesn't understand what's happening. Corwin watched him through the glass. There it was. Not panic, not guilt shouted out loud. Something smaller and more useful. irritation that the room had stopped obeying him. Kendra stepped back into the corridor and spoke into her radio. Silver Ridge Command, this is Sergeant Booth. I need baggage room access restricted and the west waiting area bag held in place. Request City Hazmat for evaluation of an insulated transport item following certified K9 chemical alert. No public hazard confirmed at this time. Keep passenger movement routed east, a dispatcher acknowledged. The word hazmat did not echo through the terminal. It stayed inside radios, inside procedure, inside people trained to remain calm. Sarah watched Kendra through the glass. Her hand still rested on Atlas. Her breathing had steadied, though every sound from Roland's room made her shoulders tighten again. Then the second officer's tablet chimed. He looked down, read, and glanced at Kendra. "What is it?" she asked. "We ran Sarah Belmont through adult missing persons based on her ID copy and service record," he said. "There's an active welfare bulletin out of Tacoma. Report filed 6 days ago by her sister, Adele Belmont. Sarah failed to arrive at a scheduled delivery handoff and stopped responding. Vehicle found at a motel outside Pasco. The corridor went still. Corwin looked through the glass at Sarah. She was not looking at him. She was looking at Roland, or rather at the wall between them, as if walls had never been enough. Kendra took the tablet, confirmed the image, and turned toward Roland's room. The man in the gray overcoat was no longer smiling with his whole face. The mouth remained curved, but the eyes had gone flat. Kendra opened the door. "Mr. Kessick," she said. "Sarah Belmont is listed in an active adult welfare bulletin. Until we verify your authority to transport her, you are no longer being treated as her lawful escort." Roland held her gaze. For 1 second, his fingers moved toward the badge on his lanyard. Then they stopped. Outside, snow continued to shine beneath the morning sun, bright enough to make the depot look untouched. Inside, the ordinary day had ended. Silver Ridge did not shut down like a place in panic. It narrowed. That was the first thing Corwin noticed as Sergeant Kendra Booth began moving people away from the west side of the terminal. The depot still had lights, announcements, rolling suitcases, and the low winter rumble of engines outside. Coffee still steamed in paper cups. A driver still checked his clipboard near Bay 6. But the shape of the morning had changed. The crowd was being guided elsewhere. Nothing dramatic enough to frighten them. Nothing loud enough to turn uncertainty into fear. Security barriers rolled into place. A maintenance sign appeared near the corridor. Temporary technical issue. Please, use east gates. Passengers grumbled, adjusted bags, and followed instructions. That was how good procedure worked. It protected people without asking them to understand the whole danger. Corwin stood just outside the security corridor with Atlas at his side. The German Shepherd had completed one final pass at a safe distance from the blue insulated transport bag before Kendra ordered the area cleared. Atlas had alerted again, this time lower and sharper, nose angled toward the bag's underside rather than the top zipper. After that, Corwin pulled him back. A part of him wanted to stay closer. The old part. The part trained to close every gap with his own body. Instead, he clipped Atlas's leash shorter, stepped behind the line Kendra marked, and stayed there. The bag sat alone near the west bench, surrounded by empty seats and winter light. Across the corridor, Roland Kessick watched through the glass of the interview room. He had stopped pretending to read the papers Kendra had placed before him. His face remained composed, but composition had begun to look like labor. The smile had become something he had to hold in place. Sarah Belmont sat in the opposite room. Atlas knew it without being told. Every few seconds, his left ear turned toward her door. Corwin felt the dog's attention split in two, one half trained on the dangerous object, the other on the woman who had touched him like he was the only safe thing in a world of glass walls. "Let him rest," Kendra said quietly as she came to stand beside Corwin. "I am. You too, if you remember how." Corwin gave her a short glance. Kendra was not smiling. Her red notebook was open in one gloved hand, times and names lined down the page in tight handwriting. She had a way of speaking that made humor sound like documentation. "City Hazmat is 4 minutes out," she said. Fire department lead requested confirmation that no one handled the bag after alert. No one did. Good. Her eyes went to Atlas. He earned his biscuit today. Not finished yet. No, Kendra said. I suppose not. The first hazmat unit arrived without sirens. A white truck with orange striping rolled into the service lane behind the depot, followed by a smaller response van. The crew entered through the rear loading door, carrying hard cases and wheeled equipment. Their lead was a compact man with tired eyes and a trimmed black beard dusted with gray. His name patch read Varela. Captain Luis Varela listened while Kendra explained the situation in less than 90 seconds. Certified K9 chemical alert, insulated transport bag, false escort documents, adult welfare bulletin, unknown contents, no direct exposure known. Varela did not ask the sort of questions civilians expected from movies. He asked about airflow. He asked about distance. He asked whether the bag had been moved, whether anyone had complained of symptoms, whether the HVAC serving the west waiting area could be isolated. Then he looked at Corwin. Your dog trained on what categories? Explosive residues, industrial solvents, specific adhesive compounds, cold chain leakage markers used in tamper-sealed containers. Biological detection? No. Varela nodded as if pleased by the honesty. Good. Then we don't pretend he told us more than he did. Corwin respected him immediately. Within 10 minutes, the west waiting area was sealed off by plastic sheeting and portable barriers. The HVAC for that section was reduced. A small wheeled scanner was positioned outside the barrier. The process looked slow from the outside, but Corwin understood the rhythm. Slow was safe. Slow meant fewer assumptions. Inside Sarah's room, a female officer brought her another cup of water. Sarah had not touched the first one. She sat with her fingers locked together, eyes fixed not on the bag but on the people around it. Corwin knew that look. She was waiting for the world to decide whether she was a witness, a suspect, or a burden. He asked Kendra for permission before doing anything. When she nodded, he guided Atlas near Sarah's open door but did not enter. Sarah, he said, keeping his voice quiet, the bag is being checked by trained people. You don't have to explain it right now. Her gaze moved to him. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. Atlas lowered himself just outside the threshold, close enough for her to see, far enough to let her choose. Sarah's hand lifted an inch, then dropped back into her lap. Roland saw the exchange from the other room. His mouth moved, though no sound came through the glass. Varela's team began the scan. The monitor faced away from the corridor, but Corwin watched the crew's body language. One technician pointed to the lower side of the bag. Another adjusted the angle. Varela leaned in, then gave a quick hand motion. Kendra stepped closer. What have you got? Double bottom, Varela said. Something rigid fixed under the inner liner. Small container. No obvious energetic signature from this scan. That means no device? It means this scan does not show one. That's all it means. Corwin liked him even more. The next tool was remote. A compact robotic arm rolled forward on treads, its movements careful and almost insect-like. Through the barrier, it gripped the bag by the handle and shifted it just enough to expose the underside. The bag did not open. The arm cut the inner stitching with a small blade attachment, lifting the liner in slow increments. Roland stood. Kendra turned toward him immediately. Sit down, Mr. Kessick. This is absurd, he said through the open doorway. His voice had risen, but only slightly. You're damaging medical property. Sit down. That bag contains temperature-sensitive materials. Kendra's eyes narrowed. Earlier, you said it contained personal items and routine medication. Roland went still, only for a beat. Then he said, routine medication can still be temperature-sensitive. Kendra did not argue. She simply looked at the second officer beside her. Note that. The robotic arm peeled the lining farther back. A square metal case appeared beneath it, matte silver, no larger than a thick hardcover book. Black industrial tape reinforced the edges. Any printed shipping label had been scraped away, leaving pale scars on the surface. Varela's expression changed very little, but his voice lowered. We are not opening that here. Agreed, Kendra said. Containment box. His crew moved with quiet speed. The robot lifted the small case into a sealed container. The blue bag followed after it, along with the cut liner and any loose paperwork found in the hidden compartment. Everything was logged, photographed, and sealed. Only once the case was contained did Varela allow a technician to gather what had been in the outer pockets. That evidence looked ordinary at first. A travel receipt, a folded intake form, 3 printed pickup authorizations under 3 different recipient names, a small disposable phone turned off and wrapped in a gray cloth sleeve, a paper list of towns arranged down the page like a bus route: Spokane, Post Falls, Kellogg, Missoula, Butte. Kendra studied the list but did not touch it without gloves. Transfer points, Corwin said. Maybe. But both of them knew maybe had started to lean hard in one direction. Kendra stepped into Roland's room with the changed posture of someone who had given patience every reasonable opportunity. Mr. Kessick, the documents you provided are not verifying. The facility is inactive. The passenger you identified as your client is the subject of an adult welfare bulletin. Your description of the bag's contents has changed. At this point, you will remain here while we continue the investigation. Roland looked up from the table. This is a contract dispute being turned into theater. No, Kendra said, this is a safety investigation. You have no idea what you've interrupted. Corwin, standing outside the room, heard the sentence and felt Atlas become still beside him. Kendra held out one hand. Place your phone on the table. Roland's eyes flicked to his coat pocket. There was the decision. Small, fast, dangerous because it was not dramatic. He stood. Phone on the table, Kendra repeated. Roland turned as if to comply, then stepped toward the open door with sudden speed. Corwin did not shout attack. He did not release the leash. He gave Atlas the command they had practiced for years, the one that meant barrier, not bite. Block. Atlas moved like a door closing. The shepherd crossed the corridor and planted himself between Roland and the exit, body square, head low, bark sharp enough to stop every person within earshot. He did not lunge. He did not snap. He simply made the space impossible to cross. Roland recoiled, then tried to angle around him. Kendra was already there. The second officer caught Roland's wrist as he reached toward his inside pocket. Kendra controlled his other arm and turned him toward the wall with efficient restraint. There was no sprawling struggle, no heroic collision, only the quick end of a choice Roland had not expected anyone to read in time. Hands visible, Kendra said. Roland breathed once through his nose. Then he went calm again. Too calm. The phone was removed from his coat pocket and placed inside an evidence sleeve. It vibrated before the seal closed. Everyone heard it. Kendra looked at the screen without touching the device directly. A message glowed across the display. Deliver second run before tomorrow night. For the first time that morning, Sarah made a sound. It was not a word. It was a breath breaking in half. Corwin turned. She was on her feet inside the other room. One hand braced on the table, face drained of color. The female officer moved to help her, but Sarah tried to step past her toward the corridor. Atlas abandoned the doorway only after Corwin released him with a hand signal. He went to Sarah at a controlled trot and stopped before touching her. She reached for him, missed the first time, then closed her fingers into the fur along his neck. Her knees softened. The officer helped her back into the chair. Roland watched from where Kendra held him. Something like irritation crossed his face, not because Sarah was suffering, but because she had reacted in front of witnesses. Kendra saw that too. Remove him, she said. Roland was escorted out through the rear security route, away from the public terminal and away from Sarah's line of sight. He did not resist. He did not plead. He only turned his head once toward Corwin. You stopped the wrong thing, he said. Corwin did not answer. Men like Roland wanted answers. They wanted fear, anger, questions. Anything that proved they still controlled the room. Corwin gave him nothing. After Roland was gone, the corridor seemed to exhale. Not relief, there was too much left unknown for that. But the immediate pressure eased enough for Sarah to hear her own breathing again. Kendra crouched near her chair, still careful to keep space between them. Sarah, we have someone coming who works with veterans in crisis. You don't have to talk to me right now. Sarah's hand tightened on Atlas. Corwin removed his notepad again. But this time he did not offer questions. He simply placed the blank page near her knee and set the pen beside it. A little while later, Dr. Renee Cartwright arrived. She did not enter like an authority. She paused in the doorway and let Sarah see her before coming closer. Renee was in her late 40s, dressed in a soft gray coat over a cream sweater, her dark hair threaded with silver and gathered low at the back of her neck. Her presence lowered the temperature of the room without making it cold. She carried no visible weapon, no hard clipboard, only a small folder and a teal fountain pen. "My name is Renee," she said. "I work with veterans after frightening events. I'm not here to make you tell a story." Sarah looked at the pen. Renee noticed. Would writing be easier? After a long moment, Sarah nodded. Renee placed 3 cards on the table. "Yes, no, stop." Then she added a 4th card, "Dog Staz." Sarah's eyes filled, though no tears fell. She touched the 4th card. Atlas stayed. Only after that did Sarah pick up Corwin's pen. Her hand trembled so badly the first mark dragged across the page. Renee did not correct it. No one hurried her. 3 words finally appeared. "Not only me." Corwin read them from where he stood near the wall. He felt the words settle into the room heavier than the metal case had been. "Not only me." Kendra looked toward the sealed evidence container being loaded for transport to the state public health laboratory. The preliminary field reading had already come back. Controlled biomedical research material, improperly packaged, not to be opened outside a certified facility. No public emergency confirmed. No reason for panic. Every official sentence was careful, narrow, true. But the truth inside Sarah's 3 words was larger than any field report. This was not a misplaced shipment. Not a confused medical escort. Not one frightened woman and one suspicious bag. Because somewhere along the same winter routes, another adult might be sitting under fluorescent lights, holding another insulated bag, believing silence was the only way to keep someone they loved safe. Corwin looked down at Atlas. The shepherd lay beside Sarah's chair, his head resting on his paws, one ear tilted toward her as if listening for words she did not yet have. Corwin's old watch ticked under his sleeve. Too soon, too late. For once, the choice had been made in time, but only for this room, only for this bag, only for this woman. Outside, the sun flashed hard against the snow as the containment vehicle pulled away from Silver Ridge Depot, carrying the metal case toward answers that would not arrive fast enough. Corwin watched it go and understood with a quiet certainty that the morning had not ended. It had widened. By the time Sarah Belmont left Silver Ridge Depot, the snow outside had lost its sharp morning brightness. The world beyond the security corridor looked washed in pale gray, as if the sky had decided to lower its voice. The buses were still running from the east gates. Passengers still dragged suitcases through melted slush. Drivers still checked mirrors and wiped frost from windshields. Life, with its stubborn habit of continuing, had already begun moving around the space where Sarah's life had stopped. She did not walk out through the terminal. Sergeant Kendra Booth arranged a quieter exit through the rear service lane, away from passengers, cameras, and the glass walls that had made Sarah feel visible from every angle. Dr. Renee Cartwright walked beside her, not touching unless Sarah asked. Atlas moved on Sarah's other side, his leash in Corwin's hand, his pace slowed to match hers. Sarah kept one hand near the dog's shoulder without gripping him. Corwin noticed that. At the depot, she had clung to Atlas like a person holding the edge of a cliff. Now her hand hovered close, checking that he was there. It was a small change, but small changes were the only honest ones after fear had lived in a body too long. The Safe Care Wing was attached to a veterans outpatient center north of Spokane, a low building set back from the road behind pines and snowbanks. It was not a hospital in the dramatic sense. No rushing stretchers, no shouting, no bright panic. Its hallways smelled faintly of cedar cleaner and coffee. The windows were wide and the blinds were kept half open so winter light could enter without exposing the people inside. Renee handled the first hour like someone removing weight from a damaged shelf, one book at a time. A nurse checked Sarah's pulse, temperature, and blood pressure. Another staff member brought warm socks, a soft gray cardigan, and a meal that Sarah did not eat. No one asked her to explain Roland. No one mentioned the bag. No one used the word brave, because Renee knew bravery could feel like another demand. Corwin stayed outside the room. He sat on a bench across the hallway with Atlas lying at his boots. His combat shirt sleeves were pushed to his forearms, the dark camouflage bands creased from the morning. He looked like a man waiting for orders that would not come. Through the partially open door, he could hear Renee's voice, low and even. "You can write," Renee said. "You can point, you can stop, you can sleep first, you decide the order." A long silence followed, then the faint scratch of pen on paper. For 2 days that was mostly how Sarah spoke. Not in paragraphs, not in confessions, not in the clean timeline investigators preferred. Her words came in broken pieces, sometimes printed too hard, sometimes so faint Renee had to angle the page toward the window. Company called Northline first, paid on time, first run real, second run strange, no phone after Pasco. He knew Adele's address. Every time Sarah wrote her sister's name, her hand slowed. Corwin learned to sit farther back during those sessions. At first, Renee allowed him into the room only because Sarah indicated that Atlas could stay, and Atlas belonged to Corwin. But Corwin quickly understood that his own presence carried weight. A large man, a military bearing, a voice trained to be calm under pressure. To one person that might feel safe. To another, it might feel like command. So he took the chair nearest the wall, never between Sarah and the door. Atlas chose his own place with uncanny wisdom. Sometimes he lay beside Sarah's chair, sometimes near the threshold, sometimes between her and the window when snow glare made her restless. He did not stare at her. He did not ask anything of her. He simply became a living point in the room that did not change. On the second afternoon, Sarah wrote more. After leaving the army, she had worked for a small legitimate medical courier company that moved lab supplies, sealed paperwork, and routine clinical equipment between rural clinics. She was good at it. Better than good. She understood temperature logs, transfer signatures, chain of custody forms, and the quiet discipline of getting important things from one place to another without drawing attention. That skill had made her useful. A recruiting email came from a private logistics agency claiming to specialize in hiring veterans for sensitive medical transport. The pay was higher than anything she had earned since leaving service. The language was respectful. The hiring manager knew enough about military medical systems to sound credible. They wanted people who could follow procedure, keep calm under travel stress, and not gossip about confidential materials. The first job was clean. Sarah drove a small insulated case between 2 clinics in eastern Washington. The recipient signed correctly. The tracking number matched. The deposit appeared in her account 2 days later. The second job had gaps. A receiving clerk refused to show a facility badge. A code on the transfer sheet had been altered by hand. The destination was not a clinic, but a side office in a business park. When Sarah reported the discrepancy, her handler told her the work involved protected research and that not every location would appear in public directories. By the third assignment, her instincts began to speak louder than the paperwork. The seal number on one container matched an advisory she had seen in a closed professional group. A missing research shipment from a licensed facility in Oregon. Not a public alert, not something most people would recognize, but Sarah had kept old habits. She checked numbers. She noticed forms that looked copied. She trusted small errors more than big explanations. She tried to quit. That night, Roland came to her motel. Sarah did not write much about the encounter. Renee did not push. There were no dramatic details on the page, only facts sharp enough to show the shape of what had happened. He had my phone. He showed Adele leaving work. He knew her street. Said one more run. Then done. Corwin read the notes later with Kendra's permission and Sarah's consent. He stood by the window while he read, one thumb pressed against the worn edge of his watch strap. Roland had not needed to raise his voice. That was what made him dangerous. Men like that did not always make threats that witnesses could quote. They placed fear carefully. A name, an address, a photograph taken from across a street, a reminder that the world outside the room was not protected just because the room was quiet. Sarah had carried the bag because she believed silence was buying time for her sister. On the third evening, Adele Belmont arrived. She was 41, though worry had hollowed her face enough to make her seem older in the hallway light. Her brown copper hair, longer than Sarah's, was tied in a loose knot that had fallen partly free during the drive. She wore a navy wool coat over a cream sweater, and both hands were wrapped around an old phone as if it were a fragile witness. Corwin met her first in the waiting room. Adele did not ask whether Sarah was all right. Maybe she already knew no answer would be simple enough. Instead, she asked, "Does she know I'm here?" Renee nodded. "She knows. She hasn't decided how close she wants anyone yet." Adele swallowed hard, then nodded as if receiving instructions for handling something sacred. When she entered Sarah's room, she stopped just inside the door. Sarah was sitting by the window with Atlas stretched on the rug at her feet. She turned when Adele came in. For 1 second, all the longing in the room moved toward reunion. Then Sarah stood too quickly, backed against the window ledge, and shook her head. Adele froze. Her eyes filled, but she did not step forward. "It's okay," Adele said. Her voice broke only at the edge. "I'll stay over here." Renee guided Adele to a chair several feet away. Corwin remained outside the room, visible only through the open doorway. Atlas lifted his head, looked from one sister to the other, then rose and moved to the middle of the rug. He lay down between them, not blocking, not choosing, holding the space. For almost 5 minutes, no one spoke. Then Sarah reached down and placed her hand on Atlas's back. The dog's fur shifted under her palm. Only after that did she look at Adele. Adele wiped her face with the heel of her hand. "The house is still there," she said. "Your blue mug is still by the sink. I didn't move your boots. I didn't cancel your mail. Nobody gets to decide you're gone." Sarah closed her eyes. Adele leaned forward slightly, then stopped herself. "And you don't have to come back as the old you," she added. "Just come back however you can." Sarah did not speak, but her fingers pressed gently into Atlas's coat, and for the first time since Corwin had seen her, her shoulders lowered without collapsing. While the sisters sat in that careful silence, Special Agent Bennett Crow began taking apart Roland's life in a conference room 2 doors down. Bennett arrived without theatrical urgency. He was tall, lean, and severe in a black federal jacket with silver beginning at his temples and a pair of thin, steel-framed glasses he used only when reading. He spoke in clipped sentences, not because he was unkind, but because he had spent too long inside cases where every extra word could become confusion. On the table before him lay Roland's phone records, travel receipts, scanned documents, and still images from depot footage. Kendra stood at the far end of the room. Corwin leaned against the wall with his arms folded. Renee joined them only after Sarah had agreed that she could share limited information from the written notes. Bennett tapped one image. "This was not a one-time transport," he said. "We have at least 4 recruited couriers with military, medical, or logistics backgrounds. All adults, all clean records, all people who could explain an insulated case without attracting attention." Kendra's jaw tightened. "Victims or participants? Both is possible until we know more," Bennett said. "But at least 2 appear to have been misled at first. One has already contacted counsel after learning the company was fraudulent. Another is being interviewed in Oregon." "And the 4th?" Corwin asked. Bennett slid a page across the table. "Clive Norrick, 64, former Air Force medic, widower on paper," though Bennett corrected himself quickly after checking the file. "Not widower, husband. His wife was alive, undergoing long-term treatment near Walla Walla." "Financial pressure?" Kendra asked. "Likely," Bennett said. "He recently accepted a high-paying transport contract from the same shell agency. His phone last pinged near Kellogg, Idaho. Roland's message about a second run matches a route ending near Bitterglass Pass tomorrow night." Corwin looked down at the printed photo. Clive had a lined face, white hair cut close, and tired eyes that did not look criminal. They looked cornered. Bennett removed his glasses and placed them on the file. We may need Sarah to identify the handoff phrase, he said. If she heard it, we can use it to intercept the next transfer cleanly. No, Corwin said. The word came out faster than he intended. Everyone looked at him. Bennett's expression did not change. No one is suggesting putting her in the field. You're suggesting using her fear while it's still fresh. I'm suggesting asking a capable adult whether she can help prevent another coerced transport. She has been safe for less than 3 days. Renee's voice entered quietly. Both concerns are valid. The question is not whether Sarah can be useful. The question is whether she can choose without pressure. Bennett looked at Renee. Then ask her. Corwin felt something old and sharp rise in him. That's pressure. No, Renee said gently. It depends how it's asked. Before anyone could answer, a sound came from the doorway. Sarah stood there with one hand on the frame, Adele a step behind her, Atlas pressed close to her knee. Her face was pale, and the cardigan hung loose around her shoulders, but her eyes were clearer than they had been at the depot. No one moved toward her. Renee started to speak, then stopped when Sarah lifted one hand. Sarah looked not at Bennett, not at Kendra, but at Corwin. Her voice, when it came, was barely more than air. Don't let him go alone. The room held the words carefully. Corwin felt them land harder than a command. It was not a recovery, not a sudden return, not proof that Sarah was healed or ready to become part of an investigation. It was one choice. The first one she had claimed since the morning at Silver Ridge. Atlas leaned against her leg, steady and silent, while outside the windows the winter evening gathered blue over the pines. The plan for Bitterglass Pass began on a table covered with paper cups, printed maps, and too many phones set face down. Outside the Veterans Care Wing, evening snow moved softly through the parking lot lights. It did not fall hard enough to threaten the roads, but it gave every windshield a pale skin and softened the black pines beyond the fence. Inside the conference room, the air was too warm, the coffee too old, and no one mistook the quiet for peace. Special Agent Bennett Crow stood at the head of the table with his glasses low on his nose, studying the route between Spokane and the Idaho line. Sergeant Kendra Booth leaned over the opposite side, red notebook open, one hand marking times beside vehicle descriptions and confirmed camera captures. Corwin stayed near the wall. That was his assigned place, and for once, he accepted it. He was not leading the operation. He was not sworn federal authority. He was not the arrest team, not the field commander, not the man who would decide when to move. His role was narrow: advise on transportation patterns, assist with Atlas if an item required a certified K-9 check, and keep his own instincts inside the boundaries set by people carrying legal responsibility. Narrow roles saved lives if men were humble enough to honor them. Bennett tapped the map. The message on Roland's phone indicates a second run before tomorrow night. Based on booking logs, we believe the courier is moving east through Idaho, not into town, not to a clinic, somewhere off route. Kendra looked up. And we're sure the courier is Clive Norrick. Not sure, Bennett said, likely enough to plan around him. He purchased a ticket under his own name, used a veteran's travel discount, then altered the route through a third-party contractor. Corwin frowned. Altered how? Bennett slid a sheet toward him. On paper, he rides to Missoula. In practice, he exits near Bitterglass. A charter van completes the gap. That's not a normal passenger transfer. No, Kendra said. It's a handoff dressed like one. At the far end of the room, Dr. Renee Cartwright listened without taking notes. She sat with her hands folded loosely in her lap, cream sweater sleeves pulled over her wrists, the teal fountain pen resting unused on the table. Renee had the calm of someone who knew that the loudest harm in a room often came disguised as urgency. Sarah can help identify language, Bennett said. Maybe a phrase, maybe a meeting term. We do not need her in the field. Corwin's jaw tightened before he could stop it. Renee noticed, but she did not interrupt. Bennett continued. Roland's messages use nonsense medical wording. Green citrate, second viability window, sterile lodging. Things that sound technical but don't correspond to any standard protocol we can identify. Sarah may know which phrase indicates which location. She offered one sentence, Corwin said. That doesn't make her ready to become part of your operation. Bennett removed his glasses and set them on the map. No one is making her anything. People say that right before they make a survivor feel responsible for the next victim. The room stilled. Kendra looked between them. She did not soften the truth with a joke this time. Renee spoke before Bennett could answer. These are the conditions if Sarah chooses to assist. She took a clean sheet of paper and wrote slowly, large enough for everyone to see. She does not see Roland. She does not speak to any suspected receiver. She does not go near the handoff location. She is not asked to repeat details that destabilize her. She can stop at any time. Atlas stays nearby while she reviews material. Bennett read the list once, then again. Finally, he nodded, accepted. Corwin did not feel relief. Acceptance on paper was one thing. The pull of a live case was another. He had seen good people bend rules 1 inch at a time until the person they meant to protect became a tool in their hands. Renee looked at him then. Corwin, those limits apply to you too. He met her eyes. She was not accusing him. That made it worse. I know, he said. A few minutes later, Sarah entered the conference room with Adele at her side and Atlas walking between them. Sarah wore the soft gray cardigan from the care wing over a plain white shirt, her hair tied back more neatly than before. She looked rested only in the way a person looked after finally being allowed to sleep without being safe enough to dream. Adele carried her old phone and a canvas bag full of papers, chargers, and the small practical things people bring when love has no clear assignment. Sarah stopped just inside the door. Renee stood but did not approach. You can leave whenever you want. Sarah nodded once. Atlas moved ahead and lay beside the empty chair nearest the door. Only then did Sarah sit. Bennett turned his laptop so she could see a list of short phrases taken from Roland's phone. He did not read them aloud until Renee asked him not to. Instead, he let Sarah scan them at her own pace. Her hand moved to the old service ring on her right finger. Corwin saw the thumb rub once around the worn edge. Sarah pointed to one line, sterile room off mountain route. Renee's voice stayed quiet. Do you know what that means? Sarah swallowed. Not clinic. No one moved. She tried again, the words thin but clearer than the first time. Old Lodge, winter stop. They called it clean because no staff. Bennett wrote it down. Do you know which one? Sarah shook her head at first. Then Adele lifted the phone in her hands. There's something from before she disappeared. Sarah turned sharply. Adele froze. I won't play it unless you say yes. The question hung there. For a second, Corwin thought Sarah would leave. Her shoulders rose, her gaze fixed on the door. Atlas lifted his head, not because anyone commanded him, but because tension had changed shape in the room. Sarah placed her palm on his neck. Then she nodded. Adele set the phone on the table and played a voicemail. Sarah's recorded voice came through small and ordinary, the kind of message people leave when they think they are coming home. Hey, I'm checking in. Weird place tonight. I'll call you tomorrow. There's this door chime that sounds like Mom's old clock. Listen. Behind the recorded voice came a soft 3-note bell. Bright, hollow, slightly off-key. Then the message ended. Adele stopped the playback immediately and looked at Sarah, not the investigators. That's all. Miles Danton joined the meeting by speakerphone from Silver Ridge Depot, where he had been pulling transport records with the persistence of a man who trusted patterns more than luck. His voice crackled through the phone, warm and gravelly. 3-note chime, Miles said. Mountain chain lodges used that on older automatic doors. Bitterglass had one near the pass, closed 5 winters ago after the roof damage. Still shows up on old road maps as a rest stop. Bennett leaned over the map. Kendra circled the location. Near a charter lane, Corwin asked. Back lot big enough for vans, Miles said. No active staff, but the building still has power for freeze prevention. That would explain why people can go in and out without booking. Sarah closed her eyes. Renee placed the stop card within her reach. Sarah did not touch it. Bennett kept his voice careful. That gives us the likely location. Thank you. You don't need to do more tonight. Sarah looked at the map, then at Atlas. Clive doesn't know, she said. Corwin felt the room absorb his name. What doesn't he know? Kendra asked, Sarah's lips pressed together. It took her several seconds to continue, that they already choose someone to blame. Bennett's face hardened, not in anger at her, but at the machinery he was beginning to understand. The courier carries the bag, he said quietly. If the handoff fails, the courier looks responsible. Sarah nodded. That was all she had. It was enough. Later, in the equipment bay behind the care wing, Corwin prepared Atlas for the road. He checked the dog's harness, the certification tags, the reflective strip along the black working collar. Atlas stood steady, but his eyes kept drifting toward the hallway where Sarah had returned to her room. Corwin clipped the leash, then unclipped it again. "Don't start," he muttered. Atlas looked at him. The left ear tipped outward, making him look less like a soldier and more like a creature who understood what humans were too proud to admit. "You're needed out there," Corwin said. Atlas turned his head toward Sarah's door. Corwin exhaled. For years, Atlas had been mission clarity to him. Scent meant alert, command meant response, hazard meant distance. In that clean language, Corwin found comfort. A dog did not debate legal thresholds or moral gray zones. A dog did not ask whether helping one person meant leaving another unprotected. Except Atlas was asking now, not in words but in weight. Renee found Corwin still standing there with the leash in his hand. "She's calmer when he's nearby," she said. "He's trained for field work. He's also the first safe contact she chose." Corwin looked down at the dog. "I can't split him in half." "No," Renee said, "but we can stop pretending he belongs only to the mission." That sentence landed harder than Corwin expected. Atlas had been his partner for years, his responsibility, his shadow. The one living thing Corwin allowed close enough to know his silences. Sharing his purpose felt strangely like losing him. Renee seemed to read that and said nothing more. In the end, the compromise was simple. Sarah would travel in the mobile command vehicle with Renee, away from the handoff location, but close enough to assist if needed. Atlas would remain with her during planning and staging. If the team needed a K9 check of a bag or vehicle, Corwin would take Atlas out briefly, then return him. Corwin did not like it, but liking had nothing to do with whether it was right. They left before dusk. The convoy moved east in staggered intervals. Bennett's federal SUV, Kendra's unmarked unit, a local Idaho liaison vehicle, and the command van carrying Renee, Sarah, Adele, and Atlas for the first leg. Corwin rode with Kendra, his hands resting on his knees, the space beside him empty, in a way that felt louder than it should have. For miles, they followed the winter road through low hills and dark timber. Snow lay clean across the shoulders. The sky turned from pearl to blue steel. Kendra drove without filling the silence. Corwin appreciated that until the silence began saying too much. "She was right," he said finally. "Sarah, Renee, about Atlas." Kendra kept her eyes on the road. "That he doesn't belong only to the mission?" Corwin gave a faint breath that was not quite a laugh. Used to be easier when things had one purpose. Did they ever? He looked out at the pines passing in slow dark rows. After a long while he said, "Last operation I worked overseas, Atlas wasn't with me then. Different dog, different unit. I caught a signal in a supply transfer. Something felt off. Not enough for anyone to act on. I pushed once, got told to wait. Then I stopped pushing." Kendra said nothing. "I've spent years telling myself the lesson was to never ignore the signal again," Corwin continued. "But that's not the whole truth. What is?" His thumb found the old watch strap. "I'm afraid of trusting my own judgment when proof isn't complete." Kendra glanced at him then, briefly. "This morning you didn't act like a man guessing. No, you didn't touch the bag, didn't corner Roland, didn't use the dog like a weapon. You observed, reported, and let the evidence stack." Corwin looked down at his empty hands. "That doesn't feel like enough." "It usually doesn't," Kendra said. "That's why people overreach." The road climbed. Snow began again near the Idaho line, light at first, then steadier. Not a storm. Nothing worth turning back from, but enough to blur the edge of the lane and soften fresh tire marks within minutes. The world narrowed to headlights, reflective signs, and the black ribs of pine trees rising from white slopes. By the time they approached Bitterglass Pass, The old lodge appeared on the command feed as a dark shape against the snow. The building sat below the road, half hidden by trees, its wide roof sagging at one corner but still intact. A sign out front had lost most of its paint. The parking lot had not been plowed completely, only a rough lane cut through the snow to the rear entrance. A camera mounted by the Idaho liaison team showed the back lot in grainy blue-gray. For several minutes, nothing moved. Then headlights appeared. A white truck turned slowly into the lot and stopped near the rear door. Corwin leaned forward in his seat. The driver's door opened. An older man stepped down into the snow, tall but slightly stooped, wearing a brown canvas coat and a black knit cap pulled low. He stood beside the truck for a moment, as if gathering the courage to continue. Then he reached back inside and lifted out a dark insulated bag with both hands. It was the same shape as the one Sarah had carried, not identical, close enough. Kendra's radio crackled softly. "Visual on probable courier," Bennett said. "Stand by." On the command screen, the man turned toward the empty lodge, shoulders tight, boots sinking into fresh snow. Corwin did not need anyone to say his name. Clive Norrick had reached the handoff. No one moved when Clive Norrick stepped out of the white truck. That was the hardest part. From the ridge above the abandoned lodge, the whole scene looked close enough to touch and far enough to misunderstand. The old building sat below the road, with snow banked along its porch, its windows dark except for one dim service light above the rear entrance. Pines crowded the back lot, their branches bowed under fresh powder. The three-note door chime Sarah had remembered was silent now, but the shape of the place matched her fear too well. The command van was parked behind a line of firs, where its lights could not be seen from the lot. Inside, monitors showed grainy angles from two temporary cameras, and one old security feed Bennett's team had managed to access through the property owner. Sarah sat near the rear of the van with Renee beside her and Adele close enough to reach but not touching. Atlas lay at Sarah's feet, harness on, head lifted, ears tuned toward every voice on the radios. Corwin stood just outside the van's open side door, watching the feed over Bennett's shoulder. Clive stood in the snow beside the truck. He was older than his file photograph had made him seem. The camera caught the slope of his shoulders, the tired bend in his neck, the way he kept one hand on the open truck door, as if the metal were holding him upright. His brown canvas coat hung loosely over a thin frame. A black knit cap was pulled low over white hair. In his right hand, half hidden by his leg, was the insulated bag. He did not look like a man arriving for profit. He looked like a man arriving because all the exits had been removed. "Hold positions," Bennett said into the radio. His voice was quiet, hard, controlled. In the screen glow, his face had become all angles and concentration. Kendra stood beside him with her red notebook closed now, one hand near her radio, the other tucked against her coat as if keeping herself from acting too early. Corwin knew that feeling. Too soon could turn Clive into a suspect in everyone's mind before anyone understood him. Too late could put the bag into another vehicle and move the problem beyond the pass. Clive checked his phone. Once. Twice. Then he looked toward the lodge entrance but did not walk inside. "He's scared," Sarah whispered. Every head in the van turned slightly, but no one crowded her with attention. Renee only asked, "Do you want us to hear that as observation or memory?" Sarah swallowed. "Both." On the monitor, headlights appeared at the far edge of the lot. A dark SUV rolled in slowly, tires pressing clean tracks into new snow. It stopped near the rear of the lodge, angled so the driver's side faced away from the main camera. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a woman got out. She was not dressed like someone sneaking through a winter handoff. That made her more convincing. Mid-40s, maybe late 40s, dark wool coat, tan scarf, hair pinned at the back of her head. The camera caught the gleam of a professional badge clipped near her collar. She carried herself like an administrator used to being allowed through doors. Bennett leaned closer to the screen. "That's Nola Hargrove," he said, former registered operator for Cascade Meridian Transport out of Oregon. License inactive 2 years. Kendra's mouth tightened. Still using the shell, or never stopped. Nola lifted one hand and motioned toward the SUV's rear cargo area. Clive did not move. The old man's breath showed in the cold. He looked down at the bag, then back at his phone. His shoulders seemed to fold inward, inch by inch. Nola approached him, not quickly, not threateningly. She spoke for several seconds. The cameras did not capture sound, but her body language was calm, almost sympathetic. Then she turned her phone toward him. Clive's reaction was immediate. He stepped back as if struck by something no one else could see. The hand holding the bag tightened. His head shook once. Inside the command van, Sarah gripped the edge of her chair. "That's what he did," she said, her voice thin but steady enough to carry. "Roland showed me Adele. Outside work, like proof." Adele's face changed. She did not speak. Her hand moved to her old phone in her lap, then stopped. Renee leaned slightly toward Sarah. "Do you need to stop?" Sarah shook her head. Bennett made his decision. "Move before transfer," he said into the radio. "Receiver visible. Courier likely coerced. Secure the receiver first. Do not treat the courier as hostile unless he creates immediate danger." The lot changed with frightening calm. Agents emerged from tree cover and from the side of the lodge. Kendra's local support unit approached from the service road. Flashing lights stayed off. Voices carried through the cold air in firm, clear commands. "Federal agents, stay where you are. Keep your hands visible." Nola Hargrove froze. For half a second, her face lost its administrative mask. Then she lifted both hands slowly. She did not argue. She did not run. She seemed to understand instantly which calculation had failed. Clive did not understand anything. He clutched the bag to his chest and backed away from everyone. "Mr. Norrick," Bennett called through a speaker, "you are not under arrest. Set the bag down and step away from it." Clive shook his head. Nola turned sharply toward him. Even on the screen, Corwin could see the warning in her eyes. Clive saw it too. He panicked. He turned and stumbled toward the tree line behind the lodge, not fast, not gracefully, but with desperate purpose. Snow rose around his boots. The bag swung against his side. No one fired. No one tackled him. Bennett raised one hand sharply to hold the perimeter. "Do not close on him," he said. "Maintain visual. K9 standby." Corwin was already moving. Kendra caught his eye before he reached the van door. "Controlled search only. I know. Long line. No chase. I know." He said it calmly. But his heart was already in his throat. Inside the van, Sarah looked at Atlas. The dog rose before Corwin called him. For a moment, Corwin saw the cost of taking him. Sarah's hand hovered in empty air where Atlas had been. Renee noticed and placed the dog stays card face down, then gently turned over another card. "Dog comes back." Sarah stared at it and nodded once. Corwin clipped the long line to Atlas's harness. "Track slow," he said. Atlas stepped into the snow, nose lowered, but Corwin kept the pace measured. Clive's tracks were easy to see at first, deep uneven prints leading toward the pines. The fresh snowfall softened them quickly, though, dusting each depression as if winter itself were trying to erase the man. Corwin did not let Atlas pull. This was not a hunt. It was a search for someone who had mistaken fear for duty. "Clive Norrick," Corwin called. "My name is Corwin Telfair. I'm a veteran. I'm here with a working dog. We are not here to hurt you." No answer. Only wind moving loose snow through the trees. Behind him, Kendra followed at a distance with two officers. Bennett stayed closer to the lodge, coordinating the arrest of Nola and the securing of the SUV. Corwin knew that if Clive reached the deeper woods, the situation could become colder, longer, worse in every way. Atlas stopped. His body angled left toward a broken wooden fence, half buried beneath snow. Corwin saw the shape then. A man sitting on the ground beside the fence, back against a post, the insulated bag placed between his knees. Clive's face was pale under the knit cap. His breath came too fast. His large hands rested on the bag's handle, not opening it, not moving it, only holding on because letting go had become impossible. Corwin stopped 20 feet away. Atlas stopped with him. "Clive," Corwin said, "I'm going to stay right here." The old man looked up. His eyes were light blue and full of a terrible exhaustion. "Don't come closer. I won't. They said she'd be alone if I stopped." "I know. You don't know." "No," Corwin admitted. "Not all of it. But I know what it's like when someone turns your conscience into a leash. Clive's mouth trembled. He looked at Atlas, then back at Corwin. You're military? Army? Medic, Clive said, as if answering a question from another lifetime. Air Force, 26 years, I heard. Then you know I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I believe you. Clive's hands tightened again. Then let me finish the delivery. I can't do that. Clive shook his head, the motion small and hopeless. If I don't, they'll go to her. Corwin kept his voice low. Federal agents are checking on your wife now. They say things. So do the people who trapped you. That landed. Not enough to free him. Enough to make him blink. Corwin's radio crackled softly at his shoulder. Bennett's voice came through, clipped but controlled. Corwin, Washington team confirms contact at treatment residence. Mrs. Norick is with protective detail. Safe location in progress. Clive stared. Corwin did not repeat it immediately. He waited until Clive's eyes found his. Your wife has been reached, Corwin said. She is being moved somewhere protected. Clive's lips parted, but suspicion rose faster than relief. They made Sarah think that too, he said. From the command van, Sarah asked to speak. Corwin heard Renee's voice faintly first, asking if she was sure. Then a pause. Then Sarah's breathing came through the radio, fragile but present. Mr. Norick? Sarah said. Clive lifted his head. He knew the name. Corwin saw it in the way his face tightened. They told me Adele would pay if I stopped, Sarah continued. The words came slowly, each one chosen like a step on ice. They showed me pictures. They said one more trip. They lied. Clive shut his eyes. Sarah's voice wavered but did not vanish. You are not saving your wife by carrying the bag. You are carrying their blame for them. The woods went still. Even the radios seemed to hold their breath. Clive looked down at the bag between his knees. I don't know how to stop, he whispered. Corwin felt the sentence more than heard it. That was the truth inside many disasters. Not that people wanted to continue, that they no longer knew where stopping was. He gave Atlas a soft signal. The shepherd stepped forward 3 paces and stopped. No bark, no growl, no fixed stare at the bag. Atlas sat in the snow between the 2 men, angled slightly toward Clive, ears up, black saddle bright against the white ground, his breath puffed softly in the cold. The dark ring around his left front leg showed against the snow like a mark drawn there by purpose. Clive watched him. A medic knew trained stillness, a soldier knew restraint. A frightened man knew the difference between a threat and a creature waiting. Will he bite me? Clive asked. Not unless I ask him to, Corwin said, and I'm not asking. Clive gave a broken sound that almost became a laugh. Then the radio spoke again. Bennett. Confirmation complete. Mrs. Norick is in protective care. She has been informed you are alive. She asked us to tell you to come back without the bag. The old man's face changed, not healed, not peaceful. Just struck by the first believable thing in hours. His hands loosened. The bag slid down against the snow between his boots. Corwin did not rush. Kendra did not rush. No one rushed. Clive removed one hand, then the other, as if surrendering something heavier than the insulated case. Step back if you can, Corwin said. Clive tried and failed. His legs would not obey yet. So Corwin gave Atlas another quiet signal. This time the dog moved close, slowly. He lowered his head beneath Clive's open hand and waited. Clive's fingers touched the fur behind Atlas's ear. The old man folded forward, not dramatically, not loudly. His shoulders began to shake. No words came with it, only the release of a fear that had been wound too tight around duty, marriage, shame, and obedience. Corwin lowered himself into the snow on the other side of Atlas. He stayed out of reach of the bag. He stayed within sight of Clive. You're not alone now, Corwin said. Clive did not answer, but his hand remained on Atlas. A hazmat technician approached only after Kendra confirmed. Clive had moved both hands away and understood the instruction not to touch the bag again. The item was sealed where it sat, logged, and carried back toward the lodge in a containment case. No one called Clive a hero. No one called him a criminal. Not yet. Labels could wait. A human being had put the bag down. That was enough for the snow-covered moment they were in. Back at the lodge, Nola Hargrove sat in the rear of a federal vehicle, hands secured, face turned toward the window. Her laptop and 2 hard drives had been taken from the SUV. Bennett's team had already found route lists, payment records, warehouse addresses, and courier profiles. Adults with medical training, military logistics experience, or family needs that could be exploited. Kendra came to stand beside Corwin as Clive was guided toward a warm vehicle. "You were right not to close on him," she said. Corwin watched Atlas pause beside Clive one last time before returning to him. "He wasn't running from us," Corwin said. "He was running from what they made him believe." Night settled over Bitterglass Pass early. By the time the vehicles prepared to leave, the old lodge looked smaller, stripped of the power it had held in Sarah's memory. Its windows were dark. Its rear door was sealed. Snow continued falling in the tire tracks, covering the evidence of panic, but not erasing what had happened there. Sarah stepped out of the command van wrapped in a heavy coat, Renee close behind her and Adele waiting at the door. She did not walk far, only to the edge of the plowed lane where Corwin stood with Atlas. The shepherd went to her first. Sarah placed her hand on his head. Then she looked down the pass, where the vehicle carrying Clive moved slowly away between the pines. No one said they had won. Winning was too small a word for something this unfinished, but Clive was not in the woods anymore. Sarah was not behind glass anymore. The second bag had not changed hands, and for once, a person who had been taught to stay silent had spoken in time for another person to be heard. Corwin stood beside them in the falling snow, his old watch ticking beneath his sleeve, and felt the truth settle quietly in him. Sometimes the rescue was not the moment someone was found. Sometimes it was the moment they finally believed they were allowed to stop. The case did not end at Bitterglass Pass. That was one of the first truths Corwin had to accept after the snow settled over the old lodge and the last vehicle disappeared down the mountain road. A rescue felt like an ending from the outside. One person released a bag. One frightened woman found her voice long enough to reach another. One receiver was taken into custody. Lights moved. Radios quieted. People went home, but the work after rescue had no music to it. It came in forms, interviews, sealed files, court dates, late phone calls, and the careful sorting of guilt from fear. For months, the name Bitterglass moved through agencies Corwin would never fully see. Federal investigators followed the records taken from Nola Hargrove's laptop and the drives found in the rear of the SUV. Warehouse addresses led to shell offices. Shell offices led to payment accounts. Payment accounts led to a network that had hidden behind the language of medical transport, veteran hiring, and confidential research. Bennett Crow kept Corwin updated only where he could. No details that would damage the case, no grand speeches, just short calls, measured and factual, controlled materials recovered, 2 storage sites secured, several fraudulent transport contracts identified, more coerced couriers located. Corwin wrote the words down once and then closed the notebook. He had spent enough years learning that victory announced too early could become another form of carelessness. Some people were charged for knowing exactly what they carried and where it was going. Others were evaluated differently. Those who had been misled, threatened, or trapped by false contracts were offered legal guidance, interviews with victim advocates, and mental health support before anyone decided what they had truly done. That mattered to Corwin. It mattered because Clive Norrick could have been buried under the wrong label in the first 10 minutes if Bennett had ordered the team to rush him like a willing courier. It mattered because Sarah Belmont had carried a dangerous bag, but the bag had never belonged to her in any way that counted. Roland Kessick tried to stay polished for almost 3 weeks. Then the people above him began letting his name appear in places designed to make him useful and disposable. Once he understood that the same network he served had prepared to make him the center of the blame, his loyalty thinned quickly. Bennett called Corwin late one afternoon in March. "Roland is cooperating," he said. Corwin stood outside the K9 equipment bay at Silver Ridge Depot, watching Atlas nose fresh snow from the edge of a curb. "That sounds like him." It led us to 2 adults who had lost contact with their families. Corwin straightened. "Alive?" he asked. "Yes." The word came through the phone plain and quiet. Alive. Corwin closed his eyes for 1 second. The depot continued around him. A bus backed slowly from Bay 3. A driver laughed near the fuel lane. Somewhere inside, Miles Danton's keys jingled through the security office like a familiar bell. Alive was not healed. Alive was not safe forever. Alive was still a door open. "Thank you for telling me," Corwin said. Bennett paused. "You understand I cannot share more." "I do." Another pause. Then Bennett added, "Your dog changed how some people in this case think about silence." Corwin looked down at Atlas, who had found a buried paper cup and was now staring at it with professional disappointment. "No," Corwin said. "People changed because they finally listened." Bennett did not argue. Clive Norrick returned to Washington under protective supervision and reunited with his wife in a quiet care residence outside Walla Walla. There were no cameras, no public moment, no dramatic embrace for strangers to consume. Only an old man entering a room with his cap in his hands, moving as if he had aged 10 years since the morning before Bitterglass. His wife, Elaine, was thin from treatment and seated near a window, a wool blanket across her knees. She asked him why he had not called sooner. Clive could not answer, so he sat beside her and held her hand for a long time. Weeks later, he began attending a small support group for veterans who had been targeted by fraudulent hiring programs. At first, he sat at the back and said nothing. Then, one Thursday, he brought the old stethoscope he still carried in his coat pocket and placed it on the table. "I used to carry this because I help people," he said. The room waited. "I need to remember that before I remember anything else." Sarah's recovery moved even slower. There were days she could speak for half an hour, and days when a door closing too hard stole language from her completely. She could not stand the sound of certain rolling wheels on tile. She avoided blue insulated bags in grocery stores. The first time a bus engine hissed near the care center, she had to sit on the floor of a hallway with Renee beside her until the present returned. Renee never called those days setbacks. "Your body is checking whether the danger is gone," she told Sarah. "We answer it patiently." Adele learned that too. She stopped asking, "Are you okay?" because the question was too large. Instead, she asked smaller things. Tea or coffee? Walk now or after lunch? Window open or closed? Music or quiet? Their life together began again without ceremony. Breakfast at the kitchen counter. Two women sitting in the same room without needing to fill it. A short walk through late winter snow, while Adele kept her pace slow enough that Sarah never had to ask. Atlas visited when Sarah requested him. Not every day, not like a cure. Corwin was careful about that. Renee was even more careful. A living being could comfort someone without becoming the only bridge back to the world. Still, when Atlas entered the care wing, Sarah's shoulders often lowered before she touched him. He would lie beside her chair, the black ring around his left front leg visible against the pale rug, and breathe with the steady patience of a creature who did not need her to explain the past. Corwin came with him, but he no longer sat like a guard at the edge of the room. He sat like a guest. That change took him longer than he would have admitted. In April, Corwin received a formal commendation request from a transportation security office. The letter praised his disciplined response, appropriate escalation, and effective K-9 deployment. It invited him to a public recognition ceremony with press attendance and agency leadership. He read it once at his kitchen table, then gave Atlas the corner of the envelope to sniff. "Hard pass," he said. Atlas thumped his tail once. Corwin did not hate recognition, not exactly. He hated the shape people gave to certain stories. A man, a dog, a single moment, a clean rescue. It was easier than telling the truth and much less useful. The truth had more names in it. Kendra, who had protected legal boundaries when uncertainty could have pushed everyone toward overreach. Miles, who had remembered that some people pass through buildings without ever intending to travel. Renee, who had kept a survivor from becoming a tool. Adele, who had kept calling when no one had an easy answer. Bennett, who had learned to slow a federal case long enough to see the human beings inside it. Sarah, who had moved one trembling hand toward a dog and changed the entire room. Atlas, who had smelled what training taught him to smell, then stayed for what no training manual could name. So Corwin declined the ceremony and asked for something else. A month later, Silver Ridge Depot hosted its first adult coercion awareness workshop for transportation staff. No stage, no banners, no heroic photographs. Just folding chairs in a training room, coffee and steel dispensers, and a whiteboard with 5 lines written in Kendra's careful hand. The escort answers every question. The paperwork looks perfect but cannot be verified. The traveler does not control phone or identification. Medical privacy is used to block private conversation. Frozen silence is not the same as consent. Corwin stood at the side with Atlas lying calmly at his feet while Kendra walked drivers, ticket agents, janitors, and security staff through real-world scenarios. Miles spoke about patterns cameras could show, and patterns only workers noticed after years of seeing ordinary days. Renee explained how fear could make an adult appear passive, confused, or uncooperative when the truth was that the person was calculating survival moment by moment. Bennett attended without his federal jacket. That surprised Corwin. The agent sat near the back in a gray sweater, glasses in hand, listening more than speaking. When asked what employees should do if something felt wrong but proof was incomplete, Bennett looked toward Corwin. Corwin did not give a speech. He touched the old watch at his wrist, felt the faint tick beneath his thumb, and said, "Don't turn a feeling into an accusation. Turn it into attention. Then call the people who can check it properly." People wrote that down. 3 months after the morning at the West waiting area, Sarah returned to Silver Ridge Depot. Late winter still held the parking lot in white, but the season had softened. Snow remained along the curbs in low banks, no longer sharp and new, and sunlight came down warmer through the glass. The mountains beyond the bus lanes had begun to show dark lines beneath the white. Spring was not present yet, but it had sent a letter ahead. Adele walked beside Sarah through the main entrance. No one rushed them. Kendra had arranged a quiet time between departures. Miles had made sure the West waiting area was open but not crowded. Renee waited near the security desk, close enough to help if Sarah wanted, far enough not to make the return feel like treatment. Corwin stood near the second bench with Atlas. The bench had been cleaned many times since January. Travelers had sat there, eaten there, missed buses there, complained about delays there. To most people, it was only a bench. Sarah stopped when she saw it. Her camel-colored coat hung neatly over her shoulders. A navy scarf was wrapped around her neck, and her brown copper hair was tied back with more care than before. She looked stronger, but strength was not the absence of fear. Corwin saw her body remember before her mind could talk it down. A bus engine sighed outside Bay 2. Sarah froze. Adele turned slightly toward her but did not touch. Atlas moved first. Corwin did not command him. The German shepherd walked across the tile and sat in front of Sarah, leaving enough space for choice. His left ear tipped outward. His amber eyes stayed soft and level. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Then she placed her hand on the top of his head. This time, the touch was not a signal, no secret, no hidden request, no desperate message disguised as a gesture. Just a woman choosing contact in a place where contact had once been her only language. Her breathing shook, then steadied. She looked at Corwin. "He heard me before I could speak," she said. Corwin felt the sentence move through him quietly. "Atlas helped us pay attention," he answered. "You were the one who sent the signal." Sarah looked down at the dog, her fingers resting between his ears. "I didn't feel like I chose anything. Sometimes choosing starts very small." Adele wiped under one eye and pretended she had not. Sarah reached into her coat pocket and took out a worn unit patch from her old logistics days. The fabric had softened with age. On the back, a single word had been carefully carved into a small metal plate stitched against the cloth. "Listen." She handed it to Corwin. He accepted it with both hands. For a moment he did not trust his voice. Then he said, "I'll keep it where I can see it." "You already knew how," Sarah said. Corwin shook his head. "I'm still learning." Her bus was called a few minutes later, not to flee, Not to be transferred, just a short ride with Adele to a town where they planned to spend the weekend near a lake that would still be half frozen. A simple trip. A chosen one. When the coach pulled away from the bay, sunlight flashed along its windows and scattered across the snow. Sarah sat by the glass, Adele beside her. Sarah lifted one hand. Corwin lifted his in return. Atlas stood at his side, watching until the bus passed the line of pines and disappeared into the bright road beyond the depot. For a long while, Corwin remained there. He thought of all the pieces that had made the rescue possible. Atlas had detected what human senses missed. Sarah had found a way to ask for help. Miles had remembered what did not fit. Kendra had held the line between caution and overreach. Renee had protected the space where truth could emerge. Adele had refused to let absence become acceptance. Bennett had widened the search beyond the first arrest. No one had seen the whole truth alone. That was the lesson Corwin carried back into his morning rounds. Not certainty, not suspicion. Attention. Later, the depot returned to itself. Suitcases rolled. Coffee steamed. Drivers called destinations. Snow melted in gray crescents near the doors. Corwin and Atlas walked the west side again. Near the windows, a traveler sat alone with a duffel at his feet, face turned toward the buses but eyes fixed on nothing. Atlas slowed. Corwin slowed with him. He did not decide what the silence meant. He did not make it into a story before it became one. He simply looked closer, felt the old watch ticking beneath his sleeve, and stood ready to listen. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is not rushing in, shouting the loudest, or trying to become the hero. Sometimes it is simply stopping long enough to notice what others miss. In this story, one quiet signal, one faithful dog, and a few people willing to listen changed the lives of those who had been trapped in silence. And maybe that is a lesson for all of us. Around us every day, someone may be carrying a weight they cannot explain. A kind word, a patient question, or the courage to look closer may become the small miracle they need. May God give us hearts that listen before judging, eyes that see beyond appearances, and the grace to stand beside those who are afraid to speak. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe stories like this still matter, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories of loyalty, hope, and the quiet ways goodness finds us.